Hello, and welcome to Jihad and the World, presented by Kensington Security Consulting. And this episode is called Tariq Ramadan, the search for moderate Islam in the Ivy Halls of Europe. Now, if you've been following the dynamic growth of Islam in the 21st century, you likely ran across the name Tariq Ramadan. He burst onto the Islamo-European scene early in the century, and his star shone brightly, only to burn out really in flames in the last several years. And he is our profile in this podcast. But first, let's set the stage. At the turn of the millennium, Europe was uncertain about Islam. The demographics had changed noticeably, and many Europeans simply did not know what to make of the new demographics. Well, by about 2005, 2010, many Western opinion makers and policymakers were looking for a moderate, credible, popular Muslim whose message resonated among many European Muslims, particularly the young. Many Europeans found this in Tariq Ramadan, who shot to movie star fame among Europe's burgeoning Islamic population, and particularly its young. He garnered a large following of Muslims by building what he called the Muslim Pride movement. Now, this Muslim Pride movement had many of the hallmarks of the Black Pride movement and the Women's Pride and later the Gay Pride movement of the United States, and to some extent in Europe in the 1960s. Ramadan's rise in the European Academy was as astonishing as was his influence. So who is this Tariq Ramadan? Well, Ramadan was born in 1962 in Switzerland. His parents were native Egyptians, and his father, particularly his maternal grandfather, was heavily involved in the Muslim Brotherhood. So he grew up in an eclectic environment. In his words, he is Swiss by nationality, Muslim by religion, and Egyptian by memory. Sounds quite eloquent. I'm not sure I know what that means, but, and this is the key, what is he by politics? And by that I mean, was he by politics Muslim Brotherhood? Perhaps he was a moderate Muslim whose political philosophy could be used to tame the more vocal and restive elements of Europe's Muslim population. Many Westerners found this very attractive. Ramadan stressed what he called points of intersection between Muslim and Western civilizations. He argued that Europeans and Muslims should not dwell on the differences. Rather, they should build partnerships on common civil and religious themes. All right, good so far. But some observers of the European Muslim scene were skeptical of his sincerity. First, fairly or unfairly, they point to his bloodlines. He is Islamist royalty. The grandfather, Hassan al-Banna, founded the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt in 1928. We at Kensington Security Consulting have spoken at length about the Muslim Brotherhood. For now we argue that the Muslim Brotherhood is the fountainhead of political Islam in the 20th century. Tariq's father, Saeed Ramadan, was heavily involved with the Brotherhood in Europe. So should this in any way necessarily sully the image of Tariq Ramadan? Absolutely not. Nobody can select their father or their grandfather. But Ramadan's critics point to his hagiographic books, articles, and speeches about these men. Nobody can select their grandfather or father. We got that. But they can distance themselves from their actions and their ideas. Well, in any case, Ramadan became a celebrity among the West's intelligentsia some 30 years ago. He cast Islam as misunderstood and Muslims as victims of Islamophobia. As for the blood-curdling chants of death to Americans, death to Jews, death to a lot of people, he assured his Western listeners that these were aberrations and these were extremists. But he cautioned that these very few extremists were empowered by Western policies themselves, particularly untethered bigotry against Muslims and the failure to curb insulting comments about Islam and its prophet, as well as the support for Israel. Absent all three of these maladies, Muslims and Westerners could live largely free of much of the cultural friction that grinds away at relations. All right, well, what about Islamic views on women, non-believers, and gays? What about the prohibition on leaving Islam? What about stoning women for adultery? He suggested a moratorium on the stoning of adulterers. This concerned a few feminists. A moratorium? Well, why did he simply state that women shouldn't be stoned to death, period? Well, Ramadan assures the West that Islam is far more tolerant than is understood. Well, in any case, the West smart set liked what it heard. Time magazine named him one of the world's top 100 intellectuals of 2004. Listen to what it wrote. Quote, "Few observers deny the seductive brilliance of Swiss philosopher and Islamic theoretician Tariq Ramadan, but disagreement over his true agenda is ferocious." Now, this may not be quite as fawning as it first seems. Yeah, many people would agree with the first assessment that he has seductive brilliance, as is proven by his large following. Throughout his 30s, he was photogenic and he knew how to pose in front of Western and Muslim audiences. He also had a charisma, so maybe that's what was meant by the seductive brilliance. And the second part of the sentence is equally true. There is ferocious disagreement about his true views. And one journalist who investigated and carefully laid out her case is Caroline Forest. Forest is a feminist writer, very French. She examined Ramadan's lectures, books, and public pronouncements to understand his unvarnished political philosophy. And she found a lot. She accused him of double discourse. One set of ideas were proffered to French Western audiences, and yet another was to his European Muslim following. She cites a handbook edited and largely written by Ramadan. According to Forest, it is a guide of double talk, or taqiyya, as it is called in Arabic. Ramadan practices this taqiyya to deceive Western audiences. Forest concludes that Ramadan is insincere about his Western leanings, and he is at his core an apostle of fundamentalist Islam. Well, at other times, Ramadan sounds like he is mistranslating things. Really doesn't make a lot of sense. On British television, he responded to the question whether or not it is acceptable to kill children, period. His answer, quote, "I don't believe that an 8-year-old child is a soldier. These acts are condemnable, and therefore one has to condemn them in themselves. But I say to the international community that they are contextually explicable and not justifiable." Well, what do you mean by contextually explicable? Many were confused. If they are condemnable, then why didn't he use the active voice and say, "I condemn them"? Well, confused or not, Notre Dame offered him a prestigious full-time professorship at the Kroc Institute. The Kroc Institute? Yes, it's the Kroc Institute of International Peace, and it offers undergraduate and graduate degrees, including a PhD in peace studies. Well, the Department of U.S. Homeland Security scotched the offer by revoking his visa on the ground of his associations with extremist organizations. Notre Dame was stunned. A Notre Dame spokesman responded, "We know of no reason why he shouldn't be allowed in. If we did, we wouldn't have hired him." However, and I quote again, "the fact that it was revoked at the 11th hour seems like it was a calculated political move by his opponents." So he didn't get the job at Notre Dame, but he didn't worry because Oxford scooped him up for a teaching post, and he developed a large following there. At the same time, scholar of the Middle East Daniel Pipes began to point out the praise and the proven associations Ramadan held for extremists. He noted that France banned him from entering in 1996 on the suspicion that he had links to an Algerian Islamist who had recently launched terrorist activities in Paris. Pipes also revealed that some of the circumlocution and babble in which Dr. Ramadan indulges. Also, Dr. Ramadan denied that there was any certain proof that bin Laden was behind 9/11. He publicly refers to Islamist atrocities of 9/11, Bali, and Madrid as, quote, interventions. Interventions? Why not a full-throated condemnation of the attacks? Why not call them terrorist attacks? Over the past 20 years, he had moved between universities. In the United States, his visa revocation to Notre Dame was lifted, and he spoke at the Cooper Union in New York City in 2010. But then things got to be very difficult for him. Then came the charges of rape. A blizzard of charges came in 2017. A 45-year-old disabled French convert accused him of rape. Then came 4 Swiss women. In November 2017, Oxford asked him to leave, and he went to France, where he was arrested on charges of rape there. He was tried, convicted, and sentenced to 18 years in prison. To boot, he has multiple sclerosis, so it's likely that he'll stay in French prisons for a long time and an agonizing time. All right, so what to make of all this? Well, the first thing is that he was arrested at the very, very worst possible time for charges of sexual harassment, let alone rape. We all know about the Me Too movement. And here you had charges by numerous women at different places and at different times. Certainly men have been falsely accused of sexual activities. That's true, but I don't think it's really looking good for him. Certainly the juries did not think it was really contestable, and they did find him guilty. And after this, he seems to be completely abandoned. I don't know of any large following that stands behind him and says, yes, we believe you, Tariq Ramadan. So it seems to me that this really harkens back to 2 cases. One case really very kind of old, and that would be the Oscar Wilde case. Now, he was the toast of London's literary scene, very much of a dandy, huge followings. Now, he was convicted of gross indecency, including the charges that he preyed on underage boys, and he was imprisoned in 2 years and then took voluntary exile in a Parisian tenement. He died in genteel penury. Now, similarly, the friends of Epstein and Maxwell seem to have abandoned him very quickly when it looks like he had charges against women, and particularly underage women. Oscar Wilde was rehabilitated posthumously. Within a generation, the post-Victorian set rediscovered his wit and delighted in his social satires and some of his parodies. Okay. So perhaps Ramadan will be cast as a misunderstood and unfairly imprisoned philosopher some years after his death. And this is possible, but I don't think it is very likely. We mentioned his multiple independent charges of rape, and that's not easily forgiven or forgotten. But another reason is this, that Wilde's work endures. Where's the weight, the gravitas? It could be that a future generation will find some things there that this author certainly doesn't see. They may say, if we had only listened to Tariq Ramadan, if we did that, we would not have some of the problems now, this friction between two conflicting civilizations in one continent. It's possible, but I really don't see that at all. I don't see that any there for that. It's also that the discourse has changed quite a bit. Many Westerners look back at the first 25 years of this new millennium and say, hey, we made concession after concession after concession. What have we gotten for it? That would be their case. Many Muslims feel, on the other hand, that no, we are not getting what we want. We don't feel welcome or wanted here, that we continue to be the victims of Islamophobia. So it seems to me that the positions of the West, the secularists, and the Muslims in Europe have calcified to some extent. And for that reason, Tariq Ramadan, even if there was much substance to it, would be seen as worn and weak. Well, these are just my views. Maybe you've been following him, and we here at Kensington Security Consulting would love to hear your views. And thank you for following this. This was my maiden video cast. We have podcasts on different channels earlier, but this is the first we made with video. Hope you'll hang in with us, give us a like and a subscription, and please look forward to our book coming out. That would be Cauldron of Terror, and that will come out in 2026 in the summer, late summer. And we'll be talking to you about that later. Thanks again. Oh, finally, nothing in this video cast, or any video cast that I make, reflects the official position of the United States government. Thanks again. Out here.